Welcome back to the channel. As I promised you maybe a couple of days ago, I'll try and do some tests on telescopic antennas as well. I'm here at my usual testing spot, about 850 meters away from my X50 on the roof at home. I'll do an overlay with a terrain plot so you can see the topology. It's a fairly cleared line of sight and also a clear Fresnel zone, so it's an ideal place to test out antennas and for measurements. At home, I got the ICR AT600. I'll do an overlay of that as well on the screen, so you can see that it's a communications receiver. I'll be using that connected to SDR console, and this is what you're going to see on screen when I start transmitting. So I'll go through 4 different telescopic antennas. I'll try most of them, both collapsed and extended. And also I'll compare that to the stock antenna of the FT5 Delta. Starting out with the stock antenna and working our way through all these other telescopic ones. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing the stock antenna of the FT5 Delta. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. Next up is the NA773, I think it's called. Yeah, NA773. Doesn't say Nagoya on the box nor on the antenna, but I'm thinking maybe this is a replica of a Nagoya antenna, seeing as it's called the NA something. We'll try it. First extended and, first collapsed and then extended. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing the NA773 replica antenna. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. And keeping the same antenna. It's not really that much longer when you extend it, but I'm guessing it's going to make at least some difference. So let's try it extended as well. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet, still on the NA773 antenna, this time extended. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. Next up is the Abbree. It's called AR-775. I don't know if they actually replicate Abbree antennas or if they're cheap enough already that's no point. So whether or not this is a genuine, I don't know, but we'll try it anyway. First collapsed, and then we'll try it extended. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing the AR-775 antenna collapsed. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. And we'll do the same test with the antenna extended. It's about the same length as the previous one when we extend it. So let's see how that works. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing, still on the AR-775, but this time extended. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. Next up is another no-name antenna. This is called the RH660. I do think this is a replica of some of the name brands, but it doesn't say anything on the box, so I wouldn't call it a fake as such. We'll start. It's a little bit longer, and that's quite a bit longer when you actually extend it. We'll start with it collapsed and see how that works. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing the RH660S. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. And I don't know if you're gonna be able to show you this, but when you extend this, it's actually quite a bit longer. I think it's a little bit more than a meter long when you extend it. So this has the potential to actually work quite well. Let's measure it and see how that turns out. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing the RH660S, and now extended. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet testing. And finally, we'll do a well-known antenna. This is the RH770. This is the genuine diamond antenna. We've tested this at least a couple of times before, and we know this will do well. But it's nice to have as a, let's see, even longer than the last one. It's nice to have as a reference point for the other telescopic antennas. So I'll just test this extended. Doesn't really matter, and it's not made for using collapsed anyway. So final test for today, RH770. This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet Juliet testing the RH770 extended. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? This is Lima Bravo 5 Juliet Juliet testing. Yeah, that about wraps it up for today. We should have some nice results on the tape at home. So if you join me, I'll do another summary, and we'll see if any of these telescopic antennas are actually worth owning. So I'll meet you back at the bench in just a little while. Welcome back to the bench. I figured instead of you looking at my talking hands, we'd just skip straight into the overlays and the results of this test. We'll do basically two comparisons. We'll be comparing the antennas in their collapsed state with the stock antenna of the FT5D, and we'll be comparing them in their extended state to the Diamond RH770 antenna. And as you can see on screen here now, the Diamond 770 antenna performed 8.9 dBs above the stock antenna in this test. So this is the benchmark that we will work against, and we'll have a look at the three different antennas and how they performed in comparison to this. First up, we look at the No-brand RH773, probably a Nagoya clone of some sort, but it doesn't say Nagoya on it anywhere, so I wouldn't say it's a fake as such. And you're seeing that we measured minus 30.7 dBms with that thing collapsed, and that is actually 14.3 dB less or below what we measure with the stock antenna. So it's doing pretty horribly compared to the stock antenna. When it comes to that antenna in its extended form, we measure that at minus 15.9 dBm, which is 8.4 dB below the RH770 antenna, but it's actually 0.5 dB above the stock antenna. So with that huge extended antenna, you get an additional 0.5 dB compared to the relatively short stock antenna on the FT5 Delta. I'd say that makes this antenna practically useless in any case I can think of. So for my part, at least, I'll be throwing these straight into the trash. Next up, we look at the Abbree antenna, and with that thing collapsed, we measure minus 29.6 dBm. That is 13.6 dB below the stock antenna, so pretty bad overall compared to the stock antenna for that as well. In its extended form, we measure that at minus 14.4 dBm, which is 6.9 dB below the RH770. Not nearly as bad as the previous one, but still not particularly good. But we do get a 2 dB gain over the stock antenna with the Abbree 779 extended. So at something, that means it's probably it's a useful gain to get, but I don't know if it's worth it for the extra length that you need to carry around. Doesn't do any worse than some of the other longish antennas. So I guess if you plan on using it in the extended state, then this is it's an alright antenna. Last for today, we're looking at the No-brand RH660S antenna. And looking at it first in its collapsed form, we measure that at minus 19.1 dBm. That's 2.7 dB below the stock antenna. So not horrible, still not brilliant, but at least it's not horrible. What's more interesting is what we see when we actually extend the RH660S, because then we measure it at minus 9.8 dBm. That is just 3.2 dB below the RH773 antenna, and that is a very, very good antenna. It's performing about as good as the fake RH770 antennas that we tested a few videos back. And also we see you get a 6.6 dB gain above the stock antenna of the FT5 Delta. So I think this is actually a worthwhile antenna, and I will actually be ordering some more. This is a good antenna to bring along. You can still use it in its collapsed form. But if you just need that extra gain, you just extend it, and there you have it. So, conclusion for today: the two header antennas are, well, probably not worth your trouble, but the RH660S antenna, no-name antenna from AliExpress, as probably actually quite a good buy. As I said, that's it for today. If you like this video, I would ask you to leave me a thumbs up. That'd be a nice thing. If you like this sort of content, or content having to do with radio in general, please consider subscribing. And if you saw something wrong or have any comments or suggestions for other things to test or other ways of testing it, I'm always interested in learning. So please do leave a comment below if you have anything to say. Other than that, I will just say until next time, thank you so much for watching.